We wanted to share with you about our time in marriage counseling because it was so extremely important what we learned. The spiritual truths that we learned during that time is absolutely what changed our life. Yes, we learned some things about being a better wife and being a better husband and letting go of hurts, but learning who we were in Christ was the thing that really made the difference in our life.
And me coming from a performance background, I, all I want to do is show me how and I can do it. But really, I wasn't made to do it. Only God lived His life through me, and that's what was so amazing for me to learn is that the only way to truly love my wife, the only way to truly be who I am, is let Christ live through me, and that's what we're to be filled with the Spirit. We're to be filled with His life, and to learn that was different because I was always thinking I can do it. Just give me the plan and I'll go with it. But to realize my plans weren't working out, and I couldn't make a marriage work. Only God can make it work.
Yeah, I remember when Tim said to me when we talked about getting married, I told him I was pregnant, and I remember him saying, I will do whatever it takes to make you happy. And that was truly the beginning of some serious brokenness in his life because he did become the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect everything, and it still wasn't enough. And God wasn't allowing me to respond to him because he was breaking him of his self sufficiency. Now, my flesh was really different. My flesh was to withdraw, to become overwhelmed, to say, I can't do it, to want to run, to want to escape. And God wasn't allowing that to work for me either. So, when we went through marriage counseling and we began to learn about our co crucifixion with Christ, I was a mess. I was crying my eyes out every Monday night when we would go for counseling. I really, really wanted to die. There were so many nights that I was battling with suicidal thoughts. And when our counselor took us to a series of diagrams to explain to us spiritual truths, the light bulb came on for me. He showed us that we are made up of a body, soul, and spirit. And at the top of the diagram, he showed us that we had circumstances and family and friends that influenced our life. Inside of our soul, we had our emotions, and my emotions were very negative. I had very low self esteem. And he also showed us um, a circle that represented our flesh. And back in 1985, they used the word self more instead of flesh. And so there was an S on the diagram standing for self. And I remember my counselor saying to me, Rebekah, your circumstances are not your problem. All that's going on in your emotions are not your problem. And he pointed to that S and he said, you're the problem. And I remember being a little shocked at him saying that. And he asked me at that point, what is your prayer life like right now? And I said, if I can even get anything out, it's help me, God. Strengthen me, God. And he said, I want to ask you a question. If you're the problem, is God going to strengthen you or weaken you? And I remember the light bulb going off that, oh my goodness, no wonder things keep getting worse. I would do Bible studies and purchase books on marriage, and I was thinking that if I went to church more and prayed more and read more books that my marriage would get better, and it was getting worse. And so I remember thinking, yes, God is weakening me. And that night I prayed a prayer, and I said, God, if anything's going to come out of this marriage, you are going to have to do it. I totally give up. And I believe that's when God really began working in our marriage.
And the same thing with me, with Rebecca, was I believe she was the problem. But really, God, when I started asking God to show me, my part and my flesh, it was very revealing to me that my people-pleasing flesh was not supposed to work. It wasn't because I was trying to get life from that. I was trying to get everything about me. Started realizing that I became my own idol, and that if everybody was happy, then I was all right. If everybody was full of joy and peace and all that stuff, because I was such a people pleaser, especially with Rebecca, I did everything I could to please her and everybody else around me too. But that's not what it was all about, me trying to please other people. I was just to allow Christ's love to flow through me. I didn't realize at the time, I thought it was all up to me, even though I wasn't constantly thinking that. But God started showing me that I was trying to get all my needs met, that only He can meet. and that only He can give. Sure, Rebekah and I could be sources to one another, resources to one another to have our needs met, but I'd get everything I need from Him and then let Him flow through me to love her. The same thing with her. The only way I could really be loved by her if she got all this junk out, I got all my junk out, and we let Him flow through us and let Him love each other through us. And that was a hard thing because I thought I was all right. I was in denial as part of my flesh of who I really was and how I really felt down inside. And I believed that if I didn't measure up, if I didn't succeed in to be a husband or whatever, that then I was truly unacceptable. And so I set out to always be acceptable, and God wouldn't let that work in our life.
One of the other things that was really meaningful to me in understanding my identity in Christ is I remember reading Galatians 2:20 as a teenager and not understanding what that meant and thinking, how was I crucified with Christ? And I remember as our counselor began to explain that to us, that we were in Adam and that at the point of salvation we were taken out of Adam and we were placed in Christ, and that we were crucified with Him and buried with Him and raised up a brand new creation. I remember the light bulb coming on again, that I didn't have to kill myself because literally Jesus had already killed me. The person that I hated, the person that was out of control with anger, that was in the pit of despair, that God took that Rebekah and she was crucified, and He buried me and He raised me up a brand new person in Christ. And I tell you, those truths have changed my life and changed our marriage.
It just saved our life is what it did. And like I say, for me, I took this truth of who I was and started acting it out mentally and saying A plus B equals C when God was not going to let it work. Even then, even though I heard this thing, it had to sink into my life, into the deepest part of me, into my soul, into my heart, to say that I can do nothing without Christ. And it took me a long time to admit that because I was in denial that I could make things work. So we took us all to God and we started praying, I had to start praying, God, change her, but to change me, show me. And she had to start doing the same prayer, not to change our marriage, but to change her to be who He wants us to be and what we're supposed to be. And that's the big key. And I hope that as we move on, you'll see this in your life and you'll start praying the same prayer.